Right, now Senator Brandis, I think we're going to go to Senator
Xenophon's got between 5 and 7 minutes.
Yes, I'm counting the clock.
So I'll yield to my colleague.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Brandis. Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Nagas, I just want to discuss the issue of Alan Kessing and his conviction several years ago under Section 70 of the Commonwealth Crimes Act, where he was convicted of, and he's denied his culpability, but he was convicted of the leaking of long-ignored reports to the Australian newspaper that revealed criminality and security flaws at Sydney Airport. And I emphasise that Mr Kessing, in my private discussions with him, maintains his innocence. Recently it's been revealed that the AFP failed to interview another potential witness in the case, a veteran reporter, Norm Lipson, whose evidence could have undermined the case against Mr Kessing. Is it a case? What do you say about that? In other words, you're well aware of the obligation to have all the evidence provided, to investigate all the evidence. This could have exculpated Mr Kessing, or at least strengthened his case significantly in the prosecution that was brought against him.
Thank you for the question, Senator. I have read certainly the media reports suggesting that this material should have been disclosed. I'll just put it in some context about what was disclosed and what did happen. Obviously, on the 1st of June 2005, the AFP received a referral letter from the Australian Customs and Border Security Service relating to an alleged media leak. So this is where this started, and the referral letter becomes important in the context.
So what date was that?
The 1st of June 2005.
Right.
Now, the AFP did not provide the referral letter to the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecution as part of the brief of evidence. That did not happen, and that's what I think some of the conjecture has been about. The Customs referral letter referred to statements made by the journalist Mr Martin Chulov in a conversation he had with a talkback radio announcer on 2GB on the 31st of May 2005. But a transcript and audio recording of this interview with Mr Chulov, in which he stated that the information came from 2 customs sources, and the 2 customs sources is the critical point here, was disclosed to the defence. So Mr Chulov's, whilst that was contained in the letter, the transcript and the audio recording of that was disclosed. Also disclosed to the defence prior to the committal hearing was material relating to the contact with Customs by Norm Lipson, a contract reporter for Australian Consolidated Press, and the article that appeared in the Woman's Day magazine. Now, as you've said, both of those issues were contained in the letter, which was not disclosed, but separately those 2 issues were disclosed in various forms to the defence and to the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions. And Mr Kessing was convicted in March 2007 of the unauthorised disclosure, and in December 2008 the New South Wales Court of Appeal dismissed Mr Kessing's appeal against the conviction. Now, there was obviously some action proposed in the High Court, which was later removed or discontinued.
Well, I mean, he's already spent $100,000 on this. I mean, the guy lives in a shack in the Blue Mountains. You know, there's a question of his resources to be able to pursue his rights. There's that issue.
Senator, I make no judgments about continuance. It's just a matter of fact.
But sometimes people just run out of steam. They run out of funds to pursue their rights, because unfortunately that's the way the system is. He doesn't have the financial resources to do so. Now, in terms of can you say whether those responsible for the Kessing investigation now believe it had been a mistake not to tell the Commonwealth DPP that Mr Lipson had a couple of sources inside Customs?
Well, they were told. I've just explained that in various forms, both of those areas were... Mr Chulov's interview was provided to the defence, in which Mr Chulov made certain statements, and also the fact that Mr Lipson was involved was also disclosed at that time. Now, the letter communicating that from the Customs Service to the Australian Federal Police was not disclosed, but it was done by other means.
But it should have been disclosed.
Look, I think in hindsight it would have been practical to disclose the letter, but I don't think it's material to the outcome of the investigation or the prosecution. But it
could have been tendered in evidence, though. It could have been the subject of submissions by the defence case.
Look, all of those things are possible, but it's not practical for me to sit here and review a case which was investigated 5 years ago. Judgments were made by the prosecutors and by the police at the time. And Mr Kessing was convicted. That he was also appealed, and this appeal was overturned.
Can I just go to the issue of the New South Wales Director of Customs wrote to Mr Kessing's superior, Catherine Magny, I think about the 14th of May 2005, so it's before that letter of the 1st of June from Customs to Federal Agent Fiona Drennan. And this is in the brief of evidence, this document, saying that about the suppressed reports, what do you know about the two reports about security lapses? And the response was from Ms Magny that they were about as relevant today as when they were written 3 years ago. So that indicates, I would have thought, within that unit some frustration that no action was taken about serious issues raised in terms of security breaches and criminality. Is that something that was investigated in the sense that it seems that there was frustration at a number of levels about the lack of action in relation to those reports, which may have indicated other sources for the leak of these reports?
Senator, I've received no information to suggest levels of frustration or levels of looking at the ways things might have been done differently. I'm not sure whether any of the Deputy Commissioners here, again, this is some time ago and was obviously precedes
Well, if the head of the unit says, words to the effect, or say that they are as relevant today as they were as when they were written 3 years ago, that tends to indicate a level of frustration.
But that was, if I'm correct here, that was someone from the Customs Service who said that.
Yes.
To another person in the Customs Service.
But that would have indicated, wouldn't that have indicated a number of people had access to this report? That's correct?
Well, I believe so, yes. As I said, not being an investigator involved in the process and it now being some 6 years ago, well before many of the people at this table had assumed the positions they now stand in, it's difficult to comment.
And you're aware, and again, this is not a criticism of now Minister Albanese. When Mr Albanese was the Shadow Minister, you're aware of the allegations that Mr Kessing went to Minister Albanese's office and provided information to them in terms of the lack of action in relation to these reports, provided details of these reports. Wouldn't that indicate that there were that there were other people that could have had access to this material?
Look, the AFP's position on this is that those reports in the Australian newspaper on, I think, the 7th of September 2009 were evaluated. The AFP had decided that an investigation into the disclosure of that report in that circumstance wasn't warranted because an investigation had already been completed and Mr Kessing was convicted of that, and we considered it not in the public interest to re-investigate any of those allegations.
But Commissioner, and my time is short, I just wanted to, why wouldn't you evaluate that if Mr Kessing said, I gave this information to Mr Albanese's office because of his role as, I think, the Shadow Minister at the time, so there's a chain of evidence there suggesting that others had access to this report, although there's an argument it would have been protected under Section 70 anyway by going to a Member of Parliament. But are you saying that the AFP didn't go down the path of, didn't bother to investigate that at all?
I'm talking about Mr Kessing's alleged disclosure of that material, and it may well have been protected. I haven't formed that judgment. But not the further part. And I think that was disputed. I could be wrong. But again,
and I'm not here to criticise Minister Albanese. The issue is allegations were made by Mr Kessing, very specifically when he went to see the Minister's office, gave information to his office, had a brief discussion with the Minister, with Mr Albanese prior to, as Shadow Minister. Can you advise whether the AFP investigated that allegation?
Senator, as far as we're concerned, we investigated the original allegation. The matters were heard by a properly formed court. There was an appeal. That appeal was...
That's not my question. Dismissed. Sorry, Commissioner, that's not my question because time is short. Did as a result of Mr Kessing's allegations that were published in the Australian newspaper in September 2009, did the AFP follow that up?
No, we did not.
Why not?
Well, because an investigation had already been conducted, and as I said, this was a matter of whether or not to re-investigate similar matters about Mr Kessing's disclosure of information to allegedly Senator Albanese's office.
But wouldn't that be relevant? Yeah. Wouldn't that be relevant? The fact that
Senator, it's very difficult for the AFP to launch investigations at every media report regularly.
No. You shouldn't be so dismissive of it, Commissioner. I mean, this guy's life's been wrecked as a result of what occurred, of the conviction. It's caused him enormous financial hardship, enormous distress within his family. His phones were being tapped. His mother's phone, as she was dying of cancer, was being tapped, which caused enormous distress for a period of something like 6 months. You've got to understand how he feels about this and the way that it has turned his life into a train wreck. So I didn't think he makes some serious allegations and you haven't followed it through. I don't think you understand the position that Mr Kessing is in and what has happened to him as a result of this conviction.
I was just going to say these issues are being considered. As you know, he's applied to the Minister.
Yes, but how can you consider? But Mr Wilkins, if the AP hasn't even bothered to look at these issues, where he has said, I actually gave a copy of this report, or rather, I discussed this report and the contents of this report with the Shadow Minister and his staff previously.
I'm not judging that, Senator. I'm just saying.
No, but well, if you're looking at it, wouldn't it be reasonable to, in terms of any pardon application, for that to be considered and for that to be investigated?
We are considering these questions as part of the pardon application.
But you're not investigating whether or not that occurred.
No.
Why not? That means you're not looking at the pardon application seriously, are you?
The department doesn't investigate matters anyway.
Look, I take on board the point you've made, and I realise this is a very difficult process for Mr Kessing, and he has maintained his innocence throughout the process. But again, from the AFP's perspective, the matter was properly investigated. Mr Kessing was convicted in court, his appeal was dismissed, and he discontinued any further legal action in that regard. So from the AFP's perspective, in the public interest, we are not going to go out and re-investigate matters on the strength of media reports or allegations by members of the defence that they want to re-prosecute a case in the press.
But that's your definition of the public interest. That's a value judgment as to what the public interest is.
That's right, and that's what we get paid for.
Yeah, no, and I respect that, and I respect very much the role, the work that the AP does. But if significant allegations were made that would be relevant to any pardon application, they would be relevant as to the veracity of the conviction in the first place, then surely I would have thought that is something that the AP may want to follow up. Are you ruling out investigating the allegations that surfaced in September 2009 at any stage in the future?
In the absence of any further information or any further representations, the AP will not be reopening this case.
Well,
and so, look, I take on board all the points you've made, but as far as we're concerned, the conviction stands. Mr Kessing chose not to pursue any legal avenue of appeal.
Because he doesn't have the money, Commissioner. Well, because, we don't all have the access to, he doesn't have the resources that follow it up. I mean, you should go and visit where he lives, in a shack. It's wiped him out. I'll leave it there, for now.